He's a very impressive young man. He's poised, he's calm, he's smart. You can tell that he's been raised by, really quite honestly, a Hall of Fame dad. Look, we're going to get to know him even more over the course of the spring, but he's really impressive.
The Cleveland Browns have just made it official. This weekend, Shedeur Sanders will start his first NFL game against the Raiders. But wait, because what you're about to find out is going to blow your mind and make you question everything you thought you knew about how this group works. An insider from the NFL just dropped a nuclear bomb that is shaking the whole league. And it shows something so disturbing about Kevin Stefanski's system for developing quarterbacks that you won't believe it until you hear all the details. We're not talking about a first-time player having a hard time in his first game. We're talking about a total failure of the organization, a lack of preparation on purpose, and an offensive lineman who didn't even know Shedeur's snap count. This is a sign of incompetence. This seems like something much more planned and evil. Get ready to see the Cleveland Browns quarterback situation in a whole new way by the time you finish reading this. Let's go back and set the scene correctly, because context is everything when you want to understand how badly this situation was handled from the start. Shedeur Sanders was a third-round pick in the NFL, but he had a lot of baggage that came with his name. The son of Deion Sanders, who is one of the best professional athletes of all time. This kid grew up in the public eye, with cameras following him since high school. He played at Colorado under his father's coaching and became one of the most controversial figures in college football. People either loved him or hated him, and there wasn't much room for anyone in between.
I don't know where that report came from. That's not a request that we made. That being said, I want to be clear, that would have no bearing in terms, whether he participated or not, that has no bearing in terms of how we think of it, but I don't know where that came from.
Did you see our meeting, in the room, so to speak?
Look, we have a lot of respect for Deion and Coach Prime. I think the program that he's built at Colorado, hard-nosed, tough, disciplined kids.
The Browns chose him knowing all of this, the attention he would get and the criticism that would come with it. But here's something that no one talks about. They picked him and then did everything they could to make sure he failed. Dillon Gabriel, the other rookie quarterback, was getting all the first-team reps when training camp started. That makes sense at first glance. Gabriel was the starter, so he needed to practice with the first-team offense. But this is where things start to get really strange very quickly. In professional football, backup quarterbacks always, and I mean always, get to practice with the first team in certain situations. They run certain packages, they work on timing with the receivers who start the game. They work with the offensive line to make sure that cadences and protection calls are in sync. Every NFL team does this, because everyone in the league knows that football is a violent sport and that your starting quarterback could get hurt at any time. You need to be ready for your backup to step in at any time, because preparation is what wins and loses games. But that didn't happen in Cleveland. Shedeur Sanders was mostly cut off from the starting offense. He wasn't putting together packages with the ones. He wasn't getting along with the starting receivers. He wasn't working on his cadence and snap count with the offensive line. And this wasn't just a guess or a guess. After Shedeur's terrible performance against Baltimore, several offensive linemen publicly said that they didn't know his cadence. Take a moment to let that sink in. Your backup quarterback and the 5 guys on your offensive line whose job it is to protect him didn't know how many snaps he had. They didn't know when the ball would come. They didn't know when he would come. They were totally off. And it's not because they're bad players or because Shedeur has a strange way of speaking. It's because they never had the chance to work together. If you know anything about professional football, you know how crazy this is. Peter Schroeder, who has contacts all over the NFL, brought this up on national television, and you could see how shocked and disbelieving everyone was, because this never happens in the NFL. It doesn't matter if you're the third-string quarterback who might only get to play if 2 other guys get hurt. You still run the scout team. You still get to play with the ones every now and then. You still get to know the offensive line. It's completely unacceptable that this didn't happen with Shedeur, who was clearly the second-string quarterback, and everyone knew he might have to play at some point during the season. And it makes us wonder a lot about what was really going on in Cleveland. Let's take a moment to talk about Kevin Stefanski, because this is where things get even more difficult and confusing. Stefanski has won the NFL Coach of the Year award twice, in 2020 and 2023. That's an amazing achievement that shows how well he can plan offenses, run games, and get his team to do what he wants. But this number should make everyone raise their eyebrows and start to think about what it means. Since Kevin Stefanski became head coach of the Cleveland Browns in 2020, Shedeur Sanders will be the 13th different starting quarterback. Yes, you read that right. In 5 seasons, there have been 13 different starting quarterbacks. That's not just a stroke of bad luck. That's not just injuries. That's a pattern. And if you see the same pattern for that long, you need to start looking for the common factor. Who are these 13 QBs? Let's go over the list because it's really amazing to see them all together. Baker Mayfield, Case Keenum, Nick Mullins, Deshaun Watson, Jacoby Brissett, Joe Flacco, P.J. Walker, Dorian Thompson-Robinson, Jeff Driscoll, Jameis Winston, Bailey Zapp, Dylan Gabriel, and now Shedeur Sanders. 13 different men. Some of them were veterans who were brought in as temporary workers. Some of them were young players who were trying to get better. Some of them were supposed to be the franchise answer, but none of them worked out long-term in Stefanski's system. You could say that some of these guys just weren't good enough, and that's fair. But this is the most interesting part. Several of these quarterbacks have had success or at least shown that they can play well in other systems. Stefanski had Baker Mayfield, but he moved on. Now, under Todd B.S. and offensive coordinator Dave Canales, Mayfield is doing well in Tampa Bay. Cleveland really wanted him to be consistent, and he's showing that now. He's playing winning football and managing games well. Last season, Joe Flacco was basically pulled off the couch and thrown into games. When he played for the Browns, he looked like the old Flacco. But as soon as the situation changed, he went back to struggling. Jacoby Brissett has been a good backup for a number of teams in the league, and he's shown that he can win games when he needs to. At some point, you have to ask the hard question. Are the quarterbacks the problem, or is the system they're supposed to work in? Now, let's talk about what really happened when Shedeur finally got to play against the Baltimore Ravens. This is where everything goes wrong and the failure of the organization becomes impossible to ignore. Dylan Gabriel got a concussion during the game, so Stefanski had to turn to his backup right away. But his backup wasn't really ready to play. The offensive line didn't know how fast he was going. The receivers hadn't gotten used to his timing yet. The game plan was made for Gabriel's quick-release passing attack, not for Shedeur's style of play, which is to hold the ball longer, look around the field, and throw longer passes. Everything about the situation was ready for disaster, and that's what happened. Shedeur completed 4 of 16 passes in limited action. Those numbers are just awful. And right away, people started saying that he wasn't ready, that he couldn't play at this level, and that the Browns made a mistake by drafting him. But were people really watching the game? If you go back and watch the film again and really look at what happened on each of those incomplete passes, the story gets a lot more complicated.
Shedeur had to deal with pressure in his face before he could even finish his drop back on at least half of those incompletions. The offensive line was getting blown up because they didn't know when he was going to move. So they were protecting the pass based on how quickly Gabriel released the ball instead of how far Shedeur dropped it. Receivers were running routes at the wrong depths because they were doing it for Gabriel's timing instead of Shedeur's rhythm. The whole offensive operation was off. And it wasn't because Shedeur couldn't do it. He never had time to get everyone on the same page. Which is why. This makes it even worse. The Browns coaches knew that Dylan Gabriel was 1 hit away from being out of the game. That's how football works. 1 hit can end every quarterback's career. Gabriel had already been dealing with the pain of playing behind an offensive line that wasn't doing well. Even though they knew this, and knew that Shedeur might have to play at any time, they still didn't get him ready. That's not a mistake. That's not a mistake. That's a choice you made on purpose not to put in the time and effort to make sure your backup quarterback is ready. And if you're a team that should be fighting for a playoff spot and has a veteran roster built to win now,
You can't let things like that happen. But this is where the inside information gets really interesting and starts to show what might really be going on in Cleveland behind closed doors. Several sources have said that there is a big difference of opinion between the front office and the coaching staff about the quarterback situation. The owner and the general manager may have their own way of doing things, their own player, and their own time frame. Kevin Stefanski and his offensive coordinators, on the other hand, may have very different ideas about how things should go.
That kind of disorganization is bad for any team, but it's even worse for young quarterbacks, because they get caught in the middle when there isn't a clear plan that everyone agrees on and follows. Instead of being carefully and purposefully developed, they become pawns in a political game. Think about what this means for Shedeur in particular. Because of his famous father, he is a controversial choice for Cleveland. Some fans are excited about his potential, while others are not sure if he earned the chance or just got it because of his name. The press is keeping an eye on him and waiting for him to either prove the hype right or the doubters wrong. And with all this stress and attention on him, he's working for a company where the people who hire him and the people who coach him on the field might not even agree on what his job should be. That's a tough spot for any young player, but it's even harder for a rookie quarterback trying to make a name for himself in the hardest league in the world. Let's talk about what happened after Shedeur's bad game against Baltimore. This is where things get even more interesting. The Browns are now talking about how to build continuity with him, how to plan plays around his strengths, and how to make sure the offensive line knows his cadence and timing. Because Dillon Gabriel is in concussion protocol, Shedeur will start this weekend against the Raiders. And now, magically, the coaches are doing everything they should have been doing since the first day of training camp. All week long, they're giving him first-team reps. They're coming up with plays that work with his skills. They're making sure that everyone knows what's going on. 3 months ago, where was this energy? Where was this level of preparation and attention during training camp, organized team activities, and the preseason when you had all the time in the world to get your backup quarterback ready? The answer is uncomfortable, but it is probably true. They didn't think they would need him. They thought Dillon Gabriel would be healthy all season long. Or they just didn't make getting Shedeur ready a priority because of internal politics, conflicting goals, or a lack of faith in him as a player. That's the issue, though. You can't make decisions based on what you think in the NFL. You can't just hope for the best and not get ready for the worst. Championship organizations plan for every possible situation. They make sure that every player who might play is ready to help out. You can tell how messed up things are behind the scenes by the fact that Cleveland didn't do this with their backup quarterback. Let's talk about the big issue that keeps coming up in conversations about Shedeur Sanders. Deion Sanders, his father, is one of the most interesting, controversial, and successful athletes in American sports history. Deion played in the NFL at the highest level, winning Super Bowls and getting into the Hall of Fame. Now, as a college football coach, he's taken Colorado by storm with his personality and ability to recruit players. Deion is always in the news, always talking, and always making headlines. There are people in the media and in NFL teams who don't like that. They think of Shedeur as Deion's son first and as a player second. They don't believe that he worked hard for his chances or that his famous last name opened doors that would have stayed closed for someone else. That bias, whether Shedeur knows it or not, has a big effect on how he is judged and treated. Would another rookie quarterback in the 3rd round have been kept from getting first-team reps like Shedeur was? Would the coaches have been so unprepared for the backup quarterback that the offensive line didn't even know his cadence? Or was there a part of them that wanted to see him fail and didn't want to invest in him because of who his father is? These questions are hard to answer, but they need to be asked because the pattern of negligence is so clear that it's hard to say it was just incompetence. There were decisions being made about how to deal with Shedeur Sanders, and those decisions made it more likely that he would fail than succeed. This is another important thing that people keep missing in all the analysis and hot takes. When trying to figure out what happened against Baltimore, it's very important to know that Shedeur Sanders and Dillon Gabriel are not the same type of quarterback. Gabriel's game is all about getting the ball out quickly, in less than 2 seconds from snap to release.
He runs timing routes, hits receivers in rhythm, and keeps the offense going with quick, short, and intermediate throws. That's a perfectly good and useful way to play quarterback in the NFL, and Gabriel has done well working that way. Shedeur's game, on the other hand, is different. He is more willing to hold the ball, let routes develop downfield, go through his progressions, and find the bigger play. That doesn't mean he's better or worse than Gabriel. It simply makes him different. When you make a whole offensive game plan based on one style of quarterback play, and then suddenly put in a quarterback who plays a completely different style without changing the game plan or giving him time to work with the offense on how to adjust to his style, everything falls apart. The time isn't right, the protection plans don't work with how long the quarterback has the ball, the roots aren't growing the way the quarterback wants them to because they're made for a different rhythm.
It's a total mismatch, and that's exactly what we saw against Baltimore. The offense was made for Dillon Gabriel's quick style of play, but Shedeur was trying to work in a system that didn't fit his strengths at all. He didn't do anything wrong. It's clear that the coach failed. Let's talk about Bill Parcells for a minute, because this is where you can really see the difference between great coaching and what's going on in Cleveland. Parcells, who is one of the best NFL coaches of all time, used to extend practices so that backup players could get more experience in game situations. He would do extra reps, extra scenarios, and everything else because he knew that depth is what wins championships. He knew that you never know when you'll need someone who's on the second or third team right now, and when that time comes, they better be ready. That's the kind of careful planning and attention to detail that makes great organizations stand out from average ones. It's not hot. This isn't going to make the news, but it's the difference between being ready for problems and falling apart when something unexpected happens. People say that Kevin Stefanski is a brilliant offensive mind, and most people agree. His plan is original, his plays are smart, and he's gotten good results from offenses that didn't have top-tier players. But at some point in the process, the development part of things has completely fallen apart. You can have the best plan in the world, but if you're not getting your players ready to follow it, it doesn't matter. You need to spend time making sure that everyone, from your starters to your backups, knows their role and is ready to play. That's what we're seeing in Cleveland, though. Stefanski is great at the X's and O's, but the player development and preparation have been a disaster. This weekend's game against the Raiders is a whole new chance for Shedeur Sanders, and it will tell us a lot about who is really to blame for what happened in Baltimore.
He's getting a full week of first-team practice. The offensive line is focusing on his timing and cadence. Instead of trying to fit him into someone else's system, they are making the game plan around his strengths. The receivers are getting to know him better. Because there is no other choice, everything that should have been happening all along is finally happening now. If Shedeur comes out and looks lost again, if he can't get the offense going, and if the results are just as bad as they were against Baltimore, then maybe the worries about his readiness are real. It's possible that he really does need more time to get used to how fast and complicated the NFL game is. But I want to make it clear right now what I really think is going to happen. Shedeur is going to play a lot better than he did in Baltimore. Not because he magically got better at throwing the ball in a week, but because he finally got the real help and preparation he needed. He's going to show that when you give a good player a chance to do well, they will. He can do this well if you give him the tools and resources he needs and actually invest in his growth. And when that happens, everyone will have to face the uncomfortable truth that what happened in Baltimore had nothing to do with Shedeur not being ready. It was because the organization didn't get him ready right. The Raiders' defense isn't that great. There are ways to take advantage of their weaknesses. They have games that are good for a young quarterback who can throw well. This is the kind of game where a rookie should be able to come in, run the offense, make some plays, gain confidence, and start to make a name for himself. There are real questions about whether Shedeur is the right person for the job if he can't do that, even after a full week of practice. But if he comes out and plays well, moves the ball, and shows he can do his job when he's ready, then we all owe him an apology. More importantly, we need to start asking much harder questions about what really happens in Kevin Stefanski's quarterback development process. Consider what is at risk here beyond this single match. Shedeur has about 8 games left this season to show that he is the franchise quarterback for Cleveland's future. That's all.
8 games to prove to the owner, the general manager, the coaching staff, and all the fans that he is the right person for the job. 8 games to prove that people who think he only got drafted because of his famous father are wrong. 8 games to show that what happened in Baltimore was a fluke and not a sign of his real skill. That's a lot of stress for a rookie quarterback, especially one who has already been set up to fail once. In the meantime, Cleveland has 2 first-round picks in the next draft. If they wanted to, they could put those picks together and trade up for a top quarterback prospect. They could use one of those picks to get a new quarterback and try to start over. Or they could stay with Shedeur if he shows that he can do it over the next 8 weeks. That choice will have huge effects on the franchise for years to come, and it will all be based on this small sample size. That's not great, but that's how the NFL works. You don't have an endless number of chances. You don't have years to work things out. You get a chance, and you better take it, or someone else will. This is what keeps me up at night about the whole thing. And it's not just Shedeur Sanders. Not because they weren't good enough, but because they ended up in bad situations that didn't help them grow. How many talented young quarterbacks have had their careers cut short? How many guys were called busts when it was really the people around them who failed? This has happened many times in the history of the NFL. Josh Rosen seemed completely lost in Arizona. After one season, he was called a bust and bounced around the league before disappearing.
But was he really that bad? Or did Arizona completely let him down before quickly moving on to Kyler Murray?
People gave up on Sam Darnold after years of him playing badly with the Jets. Then he goes to other teams, and all of a sudden, he looks like he knows what he's doing when he has help.